Okay, council is hearing our next work session on Vancouver Lake Management Plan outcomes from Phase 2 legislative proviso. So Jenny and Devin, welcome and please take it away.
Thank you. Good morning. So as you've said, we're here today to give you an update on Vancouver Lake and discuss next steps. And leading this effort is Public Works Clean Water Division Manager Devin Rosterfer. And online, we have Jeff Schnabel, who is the Clean Water Infrastructure Manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Good morning, Council. For the record, my name is Devin Rosterfer, and I'm the Clean Water Division Manager for Clark County Public Works. Today, I am providing an update on the Phase 2 Vancouver Lake Management Plan effort, which recently concluded just last month on June 30th. Again, acknowledging that Jeff's online as a key supporter of this work, as well as Tim Clark, who was our lead consultant with Herrera Environmental Consultants, is available if there are any questions. For this work session, I'll start with a brief history of the legislative provisos that have been funded over the last two phases of Vancouver Lake work. I'll then provide an overview of the most recent scope of work for Phase 2, including a brief overview of the major tasks and deliverables, and how the Vancouver Lake Technical Advisory Group was engaged throughout the process. I'll also end the presentation with some challenges and opportunities for lake management going forward, and really for council to consider as we move into the next phases of work. And this work session will conclude with ample time for council discussion. And on the next slide, our primary goal for the discussion today is to really understand what is council's policy direction for investment of county resources into Vancouver Lake management going forward. And now I'll transition into some of the history on Vancouver Lake management and the funding provisos. So Vancouver Lake is located in Clark County, adjacent to the Columbia River. Hopefully you've all been there, with shoreline areas managed by us, as well as the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Columbia Land Trust, and the Port of Vancouver and City of Vancouver's. The lake covers approximately 2,300 acres or 3.6 square miles. It's a very large lake and offers significant recreational opportunities, including hosting national rowing events that attract large number of tourists and bring money to the region annually. And Vancouver Lake also provides considerable access to waterfowl habitat and makes a popular destination for bird watching enthusiasts. Significant planning has been done over many years aimed at managing algae blooms and invasive species in Vancouver Lake. Most recently, Clark County led the completion of the Phase 1 Vancouver Lake Management Plan, which completed in 2023, and the Phase 2 effort concluded just this year in 2025. Funding for implementation of these first two phases was provided through direct funding appropriations from Washington State Legislature. The Phase 1 effort really focused on that initial planning and establishing short-term and long-term actions to improve water quality. Phase 2 focused more on implementing those recommendations from Phase 1. And before presenting the outcomes, I would be remiss if I did not take a moment to thank Friends of Vancouver Lake, who is here today, as well as our 49th Legislative District Delegation for all of their continued advocacy and support to bring important funding to the county for Vancouver Lake work. We would not be here today without them, so thank you very much. Now, on the next slide, I think we can skip ahead. I covered the Vancouver Lake Management version 1. For Phase 2, we focused on implementing a pilot beach management plan focused on reducing harmful algal blooms at the Vancouver Lake Swim Beach, as well as evaluating engineering options to improve water circulation or flushing in the lake and enhance water quality. The work also evaluated long-term governance framework options to support decision-making and funding for future lake management activities. And outcomes from this effort resulted in increased public participation and input in the lake management process through the Vancouver Lake Technical Advisory Group, as well as the Vancouver Lake Symposium. We developed and implemented the pilot beach management plan for lake treatments at the Vancouver Lake Swim Beach. The analysis of 4 options to increase the volume of water entering the lake during the summer months was completed to determine how we can dilute pollutants that cause harmful algal blooms. And we'll go over also some of the options for long-term governance and funding. And I also want to acknowledge that with the proviso funding, we were able to complete survey, mapping, and treatment of invasive species on the lake shoreline, and that work was conducted by our county lands division within Public Works. Unfortunately, as you're all aware, funding to continue this work into a third phase is on hold after the funding was removed from this year's state budget. So before diving into the details, I also want to outline and acknowledge the different roles and responsibilities. There's a lot of different county departments involved with Vancouver Lake Management. Specifically, Parks and Nature has been involved. They're the landowner and land manager responsible for Vancouver Lake Regional Park. County Lands has been involved also as a landowner and implementer of our invasive species work at the lake. Public Health is the lead on Vancouver Lake swim beach monitoring to determine E. coli and harmful algae levels, to issue water contact advisories and closures. Community Development has authority over activities occurring on the lake shoreline, and Clean Water, our primary involvement has been focused on lake water quality, including implementation of watershed actions to reduce non-point source pollution. We've also been the lead responsible for managing this proviso funding award with Department of Ecology and establishing the scope of work with Herrera and managing project implementation. Also want to acknowledge there are many other jurisdictions involved, and we can get into who else is involved if you're interested in breaking down the different overlapping jurisdictional responsibilities more. Next slide. To complete the scope of work by the funding expiration date, we initiated a competitive procurement process that is outlined on the next slide. Herrera Environmental Consultants was identified as the most qualified firm to complete the scope of work, working in partnership with Jacobs, Limnotech, Org Support, and Aquatechnics. I think if you want to go back one, Rebecca, it's no worries. Oh, nope, actually, I'm wrong. If you want to skip forward one. Yeah. No, it's missing a slide. I apologize. I'll just keep talking. Herrera Environmental Consultants was selected, working in partnership with Jacobs, Limnotech, Org Support, and Aquatechnics. This final consultant team was selected in partnership with evaluators from Public Health, Public Works. We included the Port of Vancouver as well as Friends of Vancouver Lake. In total, the final funding award to Herrera was $265,000 to complete the 4 major tasks shown on your screen, which I'll walk through in more detail later. In addition to the work completed by Herrera, the county utilized $65,000 from the proviso to pay for our project administration, implementation of the invasive species work, as well as facilitating the Vancouver Lake Technical Advisory Group process. Over the course of a year, we had 4 technical advisory group meetings. These were held to obtain input on the beach management plan pilot, the evaluation of the flushing enhancement options, and again, we also hosted the Vancouver Lake Symposium, which was attended by over 100 lake stakeholders, including government officials from local, state, and federal and tribal governments. So now that I have presented some background information and history, I will transition to an overview of the major outcomes from the scope of work, starting with the beach management plan pilot project implemented last summer. So the Vancouver Lake Management Plan in Phase 1 recommended developing a targeted management strategy to reduce risk to public health caused by harmful algal blooms at the swim beach. Specifically, it recommended a peroxide-based algicide treatment to control the localized HABs. And the specific effort in this scope of work focused on planning, permitting, mobilizing, and implementing, as well as monitoring that pilot beach treatment effort at the Vancouver Lake Regional Park. So this treatment came with successes and challenges, primarily due to some unforeseen permitting needs, to implement the turbidity curtain necessary to retain the treatment and improve its effectiveness. Without this barrier, the duration of the treatment was impacted, and it was difficult to discern if the changes in the algae at the beach were due to the treatment or due to the wind patterns and the natural movement of the water and algae throughout the lake each day. On the next slide, our consultant team did develop some recommendations for next steps as we consider beach management into the future. This includes piloting the use of a physical barrier to have a discrete management area focused on healthy swimming, as well as using a combination of both reactive and proactive management approaches to respond to blooms, but hopefully prevent blooms with treatment. Additionally, continuing to monitor and survey using visual observation, sensors, and laboratory analysis to assess the presence of HABs, as well as continuing to focus on planning for clear and frequent communication, both internally as parks, public health, and clean water all have a role in this work, and also to beach users. At this time, I do want to mention it's uncertain how we'll proceed with this beach management plan, and we recommend having more discussion around the desired beneficial uses for Vancouver Lake Regional Park, and if promotion of direct water contact at the designated swim beach is something we want to continue to promoting due to the public health risks associated with harmful algal blooms versus shifting the recreational focus of the park to more indirect water contact as a regional amenity for kayaking, paddleboarding, and rowing, which has less public health risks, as well as continuing to promote the lake for fish and wildlife uses. This is something we recommend more discussion and direction on as we continue to talk about lake treatment and beach management. Next, I'll provide an overview of the outcomes from the evaluation of the Vancouver Lake flushing enhancement options. The purpose of this evaluation was to analyze 4 different very early conceptual design options to improve water circulation in Vancouver Lake by implementing modifications to the Vancouver Lake flushing channel, which is owned and operated by the Port of Vancouver. Vancouver Lake has had a lot of analysis and planning to improve water quality, and modifying the flushing channel has been identified as the #1 long-term solution to sustain water quality into the future. This flushing channel was built between 1981 and 1983 with the intended function to flush the lake, to bring cleaner water in from Columbia River to decrease the retention time and dilute pollutants. Unfortunately, we're not confident that the flushing channel is working as it was intended to. So this analysis looked at different alternatives to improve the flushing channel, and also refined water quality modeling, presented some conceptual options, as well as cost estimates for implementation. We also, for each design, we have evaluated permitting feasibility, modeled impact on Vancouver Lake, as well as lake river hydrology and water quality, as well as the potential ecological benefits or consequences from each alternative. And the printout that you have in front of you is a comparison of each option, and we'll go into some of those details. And that is included in the report that was attached to this work session. So now I'll go through each alternative that was evaluated. The first we refer to as option 1A, which is an open channel bridge that replaces the flushing channel culvert, allowing unrestricted bidirectional flow between the Columbia River and Vancouver Lake. The estimated capital cost for this option is approximately $21 million for implementation, with annual O&M costs expected to be the most minimal of the options we explored. The model results does show significant improvement in water clarity and reduced harmful algal bloom days for both Lake River and Vancouver Lake. This option also improves dissolved oxygen and water clarity across seasons. For ecological benefits, there are strong benefits for fish passage and habitat, including improved dissolved oxygen levels. However, I do want to acknowledge that increased passage may result in unintended consequences, such as increased predation of juvenile salmon within Vancouver Lake. So we're treading lightly and making sure we understand both the benefits and potential risks. Overall, from an implementation perspective, this option has moderate capital costs and moderate permitting complexity, and provides a good balance of ecological benefit and practicality. The second option, referred to as option B, is an open channel bridge with backflow prevention added. So it essentially adds a seasonal backflow prevention to the option we just presented from May to September, when the lake has the lowest water levels, and it helps limit inflow and facilitate unidirectional flow during summer months. The estimated capital cost for this alternative is higher than what was just presented. Adding the backflow prevention increases the costs to estimated $33.5 million, with annual O&M costs estimated at $50,000, so slightly more O&M needs. Modeling does show a reduction in harmful algal bloom days in Vancouver Lake as well as Lake River. This option also shows improvements in dissolved oxygen and water clarity. The ecological benefits are similar to the open channel bridge, but the backflow preventer would partially limit fish passage benefits to Vancouver Lake. So overall, from an implementation perspective, this alternative has increased costs compared to the last option I just shared, but with similar regulatory requirements.
I have a question
Yeah.
on this one. Could you explain from a water quality perspective what that backflow, preventing that backflow does? What are you preventing from coming into the lake?
You are preventing additional nutrients from coming into the lake during the warm summer months. And it also helps keep the flow moving in one direction out through Lake River. So the water's coming in through the flushing channel and out through Lake River rather than exchanging back and forth with the Columbia River.
It's all tidal influenced. So, I mean, if you were looking at a natural system, it would go back and forth.
Correct. So this is a more modification to the flow to keep water moving in one direction and not resulting in water going back out through the Columbia, or sorry, back out through the flushing channel.
And the sources of the nutrients in what would come back, what are the sources of those nutrients? I mean, is it Salmon Creek?
The primary source of nutrients to Vancouver Lake is Lake River and Salmon Creek and the West Slope watersheds, which is G Creek, and the smaller watersheds, Whipple Creek and the Ridgefield area are the primary contributors to Lake River.
Okay, I would work on those creeks as well, but
Yes.
that's enough about that for now. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. And that is something that we're presenting as an important investment moving forward.
Great, thanks. Go ahead, you have a question.
Yeah, just to add to that, I was just curious about which of these options might reduce the tidal influence, and have you figured out if that's negative or positive for the lake?
I'm very thankful that Tim Clark from Herrera just turned his camera on, and I would defer some of these more technical questions to Clark. So Clark, can you chime in a little bit about the backflow prevention, and are you able to come off mute? And alternatively,
Is there anything we can do to get him off mute? Yeah,
Yeah.
we're working on it.
and can you restate your question again, just so we make sure Clark
Yeah,
has
Clark,
heard it?
if we get you, just curious if any of these which options would reduce tidal influence in the lake, and if that has an impact ecologically on salmon or whatever.
It looks like he's going to call in. Do you mind if we hold? And I don't know if I can give you I don't want to misstate, and so I'd prefer to defer to the technical consultants.
I think we have another question while we're waiting.
While we wait, really quick, you mentioned that for 1B, the O&M cost is $50K. I think I missed the O&M cost for 1A.
They're expected to be very minimal, except
Oh, okay,
maintenance
so-
of the bridge and removing any like sediment accrual. And currently, the Port of Vancouver is responsible for managing that sediment in the flushing channel. So we expect it to be, without the backflow preventer,
Under
much
50K.
more minimal. Yes.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, I will keep moving since there are two more options, and we can come back to once Clark is able to come online and answer that question.
That's good. Go ahead.
So the next option, this was not originally identified as an alternative in the phase one effort. However, through the technical advisory group process, we received input from Friends of Vancouver Lake to consider another engineered solution for Vancouver Lake that includes the construction of a more intensively engineered solution pump system that facilitates withdrawal of water off of the Columbia River to deliver a continuous inflow of water from the Columbia River into Vancouver Lake. The estimated capital costs for this alternative are lower, approximately 18.7 million, but this alternative has a higher anticipated O&M cost of approximately $410,000 annually because there is an electricity component to making these pumps work. From a water quality perspective, this effort does result in reduced harmful algal bloom days in both Vancouver Lake and Lake River, improving water clarity and dissolved oxygen, but not as greatly as the bridge options evaluated in 1A and 1B. Additionally, from an ecological perspective, this alternative it does increase late summer lake depth, which is good for recreation for our rowing community. And it can also support lower temperatures, which are good for our aquatic and semi-aquatic wildlife. However, it wouldn't change current conditions of fish passage at the Flushing Channel. There would continue to be a barrier. And overall, from an implementation perspective, the higher costs are, again, due to the energy demands, which will require a long-term source of sustainable funding. This option may also require and will likely require more intensive permitting due to the mechanical infrastructure and the flow modification.
Is there water available in the Columbia to withdraw?
That's a great question. As of now, our understanding is that there is a existing water right that enables non-consumptive diversion of 300 CFS into Vancouver Lake. We have only modeled that existing volume in all of these options. We didn't go above that because any effort to increase that non-consumptive water right volume would result in a significant water rights conversation with Columbia River Basin stakeholders as well as tribes. So I had a strong boundary around not increasing that volume.
Someone hold that water right
It is held by the Port of Vancouver.
by the port. Okay, thanks.
Is that a concern? I mean, it goes in and then it comes right back out. So, so I have that question. And then the question about the pumps, I guess I'm most interested in the constriction point of the culvert, whether they've made the conclusion that the pumps would be effective at increasing flow without the bridge option, that the constriction point would allow for enough flow that we need under the culvert.
I am also going to defer to Clark on that, but my understanding is that the challenge is that those existing culverts are not facilitating the movement of that 300 CFS. I do not believe that this pump alternative proposes modifying those culverts, but utilizing the pump as the main mechanism to facilitate that flow of water.
But the culvert remains. Yeah, okay.
The existing infrastructure.
We have another question.
Yes, I was curious, is this above ground or submerged pump?
The water pump, it would have to be underground. Again, I wish Clark was here to answer these more
wait
technical
till he returns
questions.
to that
I apologize. I wish I had all of those details for you. And if he's not able to come on, I can make sure I follow up in an email with these more technical details. And there's also the report that I can make sure you have, and you should already have. Clark, were you able to come online? Okay, it sounds like Rebecca is going to unmute you.
Hello?
Hi, Clark.
Hello? Oh my goodness, I've made it. Okay. It's great to be here. I've been trying to listen in, but also struggling against technology for a moment. So I think one of the first questions I heard was related to the backflow prevention and questions around there. And so what we're looking to do with the presence of the backflow prevention beneath the newly constructed bridge under 1B would be to maintain the elevation of Vancouver Lake as the tide is coming in. So it's sort of preventing more water from going through and flowing through the lake and then in through the flushing channel. So not preventing flow from Vancouver Lake into the flushing channel and only allowing flow going from the flushing channel into Vancouver Lake. By doing so, we are creating that amount of head that the Lake River is not able to flow as much into Vancouver Lake, thus preventing those nutrient waters within Lake River, which comes from nutrient-rich waters coming from Salmon Creek, as well as the release of nutrient-rich sediments into the Lake River itself. And so that's just a really nutrient-rich slough, and so preventing that backflow into Vancouver Lake is really important. So that's why I was able to provide more benefit than the river or the bridge alone.
Thank you, Clark. Are you able to also respond to the question about the pump system and if it's constructed underground and in the channel or over the surface?
Yeah, so there would be the pumps themselves, along with the fish screens, would be on either side of the flushing channel, with the intakes going into the flushing channel beneath the water surface. But the ability to maintain the fish screens is important, so they're on those rails, which are able to be lifted up for removal of debris. But then for the actual the manifolds, the pump piping would be buried and be going underneath the road to then be discharged into Vancouver Lake. There would need
So
to be
then
some. Yes, go ahead.
are the pumps themselves above ground?
The pumps would be, and there are multiple different types of designs. In this design, they are above ground, but they could be partially buried in order to allow um, the pumping upwards into Vancouver Lake. And I think we might have
Okay.
a good side view of this for this design, and this is at the sort of the preliminary stage. There are many possible pump systems that exist. Because I know that sound is certainly a concern, and so ways of dampening that sound would be necessary in future more detailed designs that would want to be considered.
Okay, and then Devin may have touched on this, but I wanted to ask to make sure. Would this be using or leaving the existing culverts open and functioning, and the pumping would be just additional?
Under this initial design, and again, there could be additional alternatives that are looked at, but under this design, we wanted to maintain the existing culverts to allow that gravity flow, sort of the like free flow, because you don't have to pay for the electricity of pumping it for most of the year. That allows to use the existing culverts. If we were to close off those those culverts entirely, we might have to be looking at running the pumps year round in order to bring water in, which would increase the operating costs, but that would decrease the construction costs likely if we're able to use existing culverts due to the cost of trenching. So it's a trade-off, and we didn't fully explore the costs of using the existing culverts, both in terms of lifetime costs or those initial construction costs. We really were interested to see, okay, what is the um, preliminary estimate of this cost estimate, and then also what is the water quality benefits we can expect with a pump system going up to that 300 CFF.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you,
Okay.
Clark. And I hope if I misspoke, I apologize. And thank you for correcting me, Clark. I'm happy you're online today. We do have one last option I want to present. Again, this was requested through our technical advisory group process, and this is referred to as option B. This involves the construction of pumps that we just talked about, but also adding a lake outlet weir in Lake River to retain higher water levels into late summer. Estimated at about keeping lake water levels approximately 1.5 feet higher in August and September, which has recreational benefits as well as temperature benefits. This also helps prevent backflow from the nutrient-rich Lake River, as Clark just discussed. The estimated capital construction cost is approximately $41.7 million, so a significant increase in costs with the construction of the outlet control, with annual O&M costs estimated at $450,000 annually, again from the energy needed to run the pumps, but also to operate the weir structure. From a water quality perspective, this alternative is similar to the water quality improvements shown in option 2A, but it does have an added benefit of increasing late summer lake depth by 23%. Ecologically, this alternative does enhance the late season habitat conditions, particularly for wetland dependent wildlife, but also limits fish passage more than other options. In summary, all 4 options do improve Vancouver Lake's water quality and offer various degrees of ecological benefit. I've provided you again with that table of more detailed evaluated metrics from the enhancement report. Again, that was attached with the work session, and happy to have follow-up conversations. It compares the modeled benefits for total bloom days, dissolved oxygen levels, as well as impacts to fish and wildlife habitat. I do want to emphasize that at this stage, no preferred alternative has been selected or recommended. We have just evaluated very preliminary options. On the next slide, to continue this work forward into a design process, we've outlined next steps. The next step is that we need an implementation lead to establish clear governance and decision-making, as well as a funding structure. And I'll talk a little bit more about what we learned there. And then this implementation lead would work with the stakeholders, any permitting agencies, the public and landowners to select a preferred alternative to move forward. It's also recommended to have early engagement with regulatory agencies because depending on the design and what they require, there could be intensive permit analysis, environmental assessment required. And additionally, more ecological monitoring and data collection is recommended, particularly related to fish passage, wetland habitat use, and seasonal water quality dynamics. This will help us reduce any uncertainties and support informed decision-making on the best final design. I'll pause if there are any more questions. Otherwise, I can move into the governance and funding structure or hold till the end, depending on.
Looks like we have a question.
Okay.
I have a couple actually, sorry.
Clark, remain on deck, Clark.
Yeah, Clark, the fourth option, just curious if the control structure actually does the reverse of what we want, besides increasing the water levels for recreation and decreasing, helping with fish passage issues. Just wondering if that decreases the flow overall. And then back to the question about tidal influences, I'd just be curious about all these options, what the impacts on tidal influences are, if it increases the tidal influence or decreases, and what those overall impacts are to the ecology of the lake. I'll let you answer that, and then I have a third question.
Great, thank you. So for this option 2B, it's really focusing on trying to minimize that influence of the tides during the summer months. And so we are focusing just on that critical period where the harmful algal blooms do occur and where we would be most concerned around that additional supply of nutrients coming in from Lake River. So this control structure is really looking only to be raised during the months in which Lake River elevation due to tidal influence would be that higher than that of Vancouver Lake. which would cause the flow to come into Vancouver Lake. And so that's when we would raise this structure in order to prevent that backflow and those nutrient-rich waters. So in terms of that prevention of nutrient loading, it would be the most effective at decreasing that load. It does increase the depth of Vancouver Lake, which I know is desirable for several recreation groups, but it also does hold on to water longer within the Vancouver Lake, which does allow densification of algae blooms. And so when we were looking at the results from this analysis, we expected to see with this option greater water quality benefit. However, I think because of that increased retention time and allowance of the algae growth, we didn't see as much benefit. It still was more beneficial in terms of algae or reduction of harmful algal blooms than the other three options, but just to a less dramatic effect than we had anticipated. And then in terms of those ecological impacts, those aren't fully known, and the use of Vancouver Lake by resident fish is not fully studied, looking at coho salmon, Chinook salmon that may be passing through the lake, either coming out of Burnt Bridge Creek or passing through the existing flushing channel culverts and then moving through Lake River. Just is not well known. It's been studied a handful of times. And so being able to assess like whether or not this will be net benefit or a net negative we just don't have enough information around what the current usage is to make a very confident decision or a hypothesis of those outcomes. But certainly putting in a structure that would inhibit fish transport would we expect to have some negative impact, but it really depends on whether or not there is that much of a fish population that's currently using this passage between Lake River and Vancouver Lake.
Okay, thanks. And I see that structure would be right before the boat launch and some of those boathouses. I'm sure that's going to be there's going to be a lot of analysis needed on whether that's the preferred alternative and what impacts that would have to them and recreation and where I launch my boat. But I just also was curious. I had forwarded you another engineering solution that I've heard about that would increase circulation within the lake itself that maybe could be added to this or separate. It was a kind of a engineering solution where you can increase the flow by a system of pipes at the base of the lake, and it sucks water out to the wetlands and it filters back through the wetlands. It increases flow, it decreases the nutrients, and it's another solution that's out there. And I'm just curious, I know this wasn't one of the 4 options, but I'm just curious if it could be looked into generally how much something like that would cost, if it's just totally out of the ballpark. If it doesn't make sense, great, but just wanted to see if that's a possibility out there. And then totally not really related to this, but sort of the filters that we're putting in to reduce phosphorus. I'm still curious how effective they are, but most importantly, if they are actually adding microplastics into our system. I don't know if the answers are out there, but I'm really curious if they are doing that, and that would be an important thing to know. So
I remember you asked that question in a previous conversation that we had, and that has been forwarded on to our stormwater infrastructure manager, and he's doing research right now to prepare a response for you on the phosphorus cartridges. Regarding other solutions for lake water quality, only 4 options were evaluated because we had limited budget. And so we had to really narrow down what we focused on. So we focused in on for 1A and 1B, those were recommendations from the Phase 1 Vancouver Lake Management Plan. And we heard through the technical advisory group process a strong recommendation to look at the 2A and 2B pumps and outlet weir control, which is why we ultimately landed on those. But again, nothing has been recommended. We're not selecting a preferred alternative. So there could be room to assess different alternatives. But again, we currently don't have any funding to continue this work into a 3rd phase. So we'd have to figure out how we would do that.
Based on what you said, Councillor Little, with pipes at the base of the lake, it sounds to me like that's a 3rd version of a pump solution because you'd need the pumps to move the water to the wetlands to filter. So, I mean, these are very high comparative planning numbers, but I would say you're looking at probably similar at 2A. Was that the pumping scenario? Some flavor of that, just to give you a really high level perspective.
I have a couple of questions. Do we know what the nutrient load coming from the Columbia River is? I think at our last public health meeting that we had a presentation on algal mats that are forming in the Columbia River itself.
I don't have an exact number, but my understanding is that from previous water budget work that was done, over 80% of the nutrient load is coming from Lake River. Burnt Bridge Creek is less than 5%. And so the delta of that would be approximately 20% of the nutrient load coming from Columbia River. I can confirm those exact numbers, but
I think
majority
that's-
is Lake River.
That's close enough. And just looking at those houseboats, do we know what they do with their wastewater?
That's a great question. I would defer to my partners in public health. My understanding is a lot of them are on septic systems, but I am not.
Where are their septic? Where's their drain field here?
Yeah, it's definitely an important source to consider and evaluate. And we public health has been involved primarily through a beach management and water quality monitoring perspective, but the specific floating homes, we have not isolated how much of the source those are at this time.
But they're on septic somehow?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
I just wanted to add, because I have a boathouse.
Oh,
It's
nice.
hooked up to the city. Most of them are hooked up to the city, city
There-
water and city waste. It goes out to, it doesn't dump into the river.
So is
Yeah.
it like a container
It's like a
that is
normal
it
house,
held?
but it's floating and it's got the electric and sewage and water just like a house.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
fascinating.
I'm not sure about those exactly, but that's how.
I think that would be something to find
to
out.
find out
Yeah. Thanks
with
for
public
that.
health. Yeah.
Ed go.
Yeah, just a little bit more on the water pumps. Would talking about noise, would submersible pumps eliminate the noise?
I believe what Clark stated is that it would help reduce the noise. As far as eliminate the noise, I don't know if I would be able to speak to that confidently. Clark, do you know if there is a complete elimination or just a likely reduction in noise?
Certainly a reduction, and I think we'd have to speak more with those engineers that have developed that pumping solution to look at ways of mitigating the noise and how much could be heard with the sump pump. There'll be some amount, and so certainly building greater amounts of insulation, whether through concrete or otherwise, could be done to mitigate it. So it is manageable, and I don't think with like a terribly increased cost, but it is something that would need to be managed.
Okay. And then just kind of curious at this point, I mean, obviously there's more work that needs to be done before in refining these alternatives before we get to a preferred alternative. But I just wanted to make sure that we're continuing to look at submersible versus above ground and the overall impacts and cost on and how effective those two would be, because I think there are some fundamental differences between the two.
Definitely. And we're aware, we've been getting input from bird bird stakeholders, as well as the Columbia Land Trust, who operates the Sandhill Crane habitat adjacent to the Flushing Channel. They have constructed a berm to help reduce sound. And so the discussion around sound in the context of the pump systems has definitely come up in our technical advisory group meetings as an important concern.
Great, thank you.
Okay, you guys have great questions. I think to wrap up, our last deliverable was focused on assessing viable governance and funding pathways for the long-term management of Vancouver Lake. This was a neutral analysis of two options. I'm not going to go into them in detail, but to establish a flood control district versus a flood control zone district. The focus has been on larger flood control districts due to the ability to generate more revenue. They're a larger area, whereas a lake management district is normally just the lake shoreline owners, which is, there's just a few of us, and it's primarily governmental agencies. While the name of these structures are similar, they do differ significantly in how they're formed and how they operate. The key distinction between the two models is how they are formed and governed. Flood control districts require a public vote, either through county resolution or voter petition to get on the ballot. And the main governing body is an elected board as district supervisors with independent authority, versus a flood control zone district that can be established through council resolution with no public vote. The main governing body would be county council as district supervisors with an appointed or elected board. And just to be clear, this planning effort is not endorsing or recommending the establishment of either of these pathways at this time, but this deliverable was intended to provide an analysis of a roadmap of some potential options that could be explored for long-term lake governance and funding. I do want to suggest that additional evaluation and discussion is needed. For both of these options, they come with different risk, liabilities, and other considerations that required more detailed analysis. Next slide, please. Generally, these districts generate funds by establishing rates and charges, which we talked to you a lot about last year. It can be uniform contributions per parcel or based on assessed property value. There's a lot of different ways to set up a rate structure to bring in funding for lake management, including setting rates based on drainage basin impact or distance to the lake by jurisdiction, or quantity of impervious surfaces, like what is done in the stormwater or the clean water fee. Additionally, we could focus just on grant funding and budget appropriations. Additionally, we have the clean water fee, which has some funding included in it for ongoing lake management activities. On the next slide, there is a pathway shown of.
I have a quick question here. Could you show us a map or at some point get us a map of what geographic area those drainages make up? Because
Yes.
if we're looking at the drainages to Lake River, G Creek and Salmon Creek, it's a lot of territory.
It is substantial, which is why in phase one, they recommended exploring flood control districts over lake management districts, which are more traditionally used. This schematic created through the report demonstrates the process. Again, I'm not going to go through this, but it does not happen overnight. It can take 12 to 15 months. And if it is a ballot-driven initiative, it costs a lot of money. And it requires significant public engagement and establishment of interlocal agreements between jurisdictions. With that overview, I want to conclude with a discussion on some of our unknowns and challenges right now, as well as some opportunities for council to consider as you establish policy direction for Vancouver Lake investment. First, we'll start with challenges. As you're aware, we were anticipating a phase 3 legislative proviso. Unfortunately, this appropriation was eliminated from the state budget. After that last minute veto from the governor, this does leave us in a difficult funding situation to carry this work forward.
You know, on that, I had heard it was because we still had a balance of the funds that we got previously. Was that incorrect?
I think there was some misunderstanding from what I have heard that phase 2 would complete the lake management planning and complete the design work. But as we've presented, getting through the design and construction process of a solution costs millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars. And the level of design that we were able to get to were only concept designs. And so we're not intending to use phase 3 to continue planning. We do want to do some additional monitoring and modeling, but the focus would be more on continuing the advancement of design options.
So it wasn't that we had some balance that,
No,
that
we
was just
spent
missed.
down all the money.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that.
Additionally, we do not have ongoing funding for continuation of Vancouver Lake Management plan work. And recently, some of you may be aware, we've received requests from Friends of Vancouver Lake and other lake stakeholders. Letters were submitted to us, to the port, to the city of Vancouver, requesting contributions for Vancouver Lake milfoil treatment as soon as possible. The last time the lake was treated was in 2021, and unfortunately, we are seeing a reinfestation of milfoil. The estimated cost for a full lake treatment is approximately $200,000. We did apply for funding in 2025 to help support milfoil treatment, but unfortunately, Ecology did not select us for funding. So we do not currently have funding for milfoil treatment, but we do have some proposed pathways forward that we can talk about.
How frequently would that need to be done? Is that an annual treatment or every few years? What does that look like?
Yeah, we've been discussing this a lot lately with the port and with Friends of Vancouver Lake and other stakeholders. And what we are finding is that more frequent, smaller treatments to help manage the milfoil regularly can help reduce costs over time and also helps just prevent reinfestation of the milfoil. And so while we do suspect a larger, more substantial investment is needed at this time, we are discussing opportunities and the value of smaller, more regular treatments of milfoil in the lake in partnership with other stakeholders.
Thank you.
On the next slide, I wanted to reiterate that the future of the beach management is uncertain. We face some challenges with getting that barrier installed, and we also are unsure if swimming is what we should be promoting and if we want to focus more on activities with less water contact, such as rowing and fish and wildlife viewing. Additionally, the lake flushing enhancement options, we still have a lot of questions. We wanted to land on a preferred alternative, but we were not able to achieve consensus, or we did not have complete information to land on that preferred alternative. Additionally, we're uncertain about eligibility for funding to continue the work. There are certain things that Ecology and other funders are more likely to fund, such as like nature-based solutions. It's a little bit harder to get funding to do work on more highly engineered intensive options. Additionally, a challenge we have to balance resources. We have other important lakes in the county, such as Lacamas Lake, and we need to be considering those needs as well as we're discussing the future of Vancouver Lake. So what are the opportunities? We did make significant progress in the last year. All of that work that I just presented was done in the last year while doing the rate study. So I'm very proud of what was accomplished, and Herrera did an excellent job facilitating all of us. I also want to mention we did include funding in the rate study to hire a dedicated lakes and watershed coordinator in 2025. We've had this recruitment on hold because of the veto of the funding. We weren't sure, based on your direction, if this is something we still want to be investing in. But I've been leading this. My bandwidth is limited, and I would like to have a dedicated person stewarding this work and coordinating partners. Additionally, we are considering potentially supporting some milfoil treatment in 2025. If council would like us to proceed with that, we would use the 2025 supplemental budget process to add capacity to fund the treatment in partnership with the Port of Vancouver, as well as the Vancouver Lake Sailing Club. They have both made commitments to the milfoil treatment. We don't think we're able to fund a full treatment this year, but that we can help fund a partial treatment. In 2026, we are including a budget request for ongoing lake management activities, specifically $100,000 to spend on lake management, both in split between Lacamas and Vancouver Lakes. And that was included in our rate study as well. So we can achieve cost recovery for that expense. And finally, we do have capacity to apply for additional funding. We've been talking with Ecology about what would be eligible. And we're continuing to invest resources in implementing the watershed activities to reduce non-point source pollution. That is the most important and impactful thing our team can do to restore water quality in Vancouver Lake right now. We have a lot of different projects happening right now. So regardless of the in-lake work, we are going to continue our watershed work. And finally, I do want to plug that we have an intergovernmental agreement for Vancouver Lake work between the Port of Vancouver and the City of Vancouver and Clark County. It's a 10-year intergovernmental agreement. It expires in 2027. This has historically functioned to fund the Experience Vancouver Lake Education and Outreach Program that LSEP, Lower Columbia Estuary Partnership, implements. And we actually met yesterday, the port in the city, and we've discussed that we need to start renegotiating and establishing what a renewed intergovernmental agreement looks like and what our shared investment looks like over into the next 10 years.
Would the partnership be interested in some aspect of restoring the lake or this management? I know they do reconnect projects.
They could be, very much so. I know that there are some proposed restoration projects potentially coming down the line at the Shillipoo Wildlife Area that Department of Fish and Wildlife is evaluating. As of now, we've only been working with LSEP on education and outreach on Vancouver Lake, but I wouldn't suspect that they wouldn't be interested. They are a qualified group that could do restoration work.
Thanks.
And finally,
We have another
oh,
question.
sorry.
Do you have something? Keep going.
I'm almost done, and I just want to hear from you guys. So I'm done. I've been talking at you a lot. There's a lot to get through. We want to continue to work with our local, state, and federal government partners to establish Vancouver Lake as a funding priority, and which we understand is the intent of our 49th legislative delegation in the next legislative short session. And we really appreciate that continued ask during a time of funding uncertainty in Washington state. So I know that's a lot of information. At this time, I'd really like to transition to hearing from you based on the current status, everything we've presented that we've done. We're at a crossroads on what to do next. There's challenges and opportunities, and I would love to hear from you. What is your policy direction for how we continue this work into the future as it pertains to beach management and treatment, lake flushing, governance, as well as supporting treatment of aquatic invasive species. So thank you for your time and input.
Thank you. I think we'll have some questions. Here's some questions right over here. Councillor Young.
Not really questions, more just comments. And thank you for coming to us for policy direction. I appreciate that. I think this is something that is very critical. You know, this has drug on for decades. It really has. And it seems to always kind of get almost there and then, you know, almost there. And so I think we've got to make this a priority. So I am interested. I'm also wanting to avoid any potential. I want to figure out how we can get dedicated funding for this in perpetuity, so it doesn't become a problem again 10, 15, 20 years down the road where where did those funds come from? And quite frankly, I have to say thank you to the people that are volunteering in our community on this. Met with them just yesterday, and they have continually been exerting a lot of effort and energy and their time into getting these things to happen as they need to happen. So, for example, with the milfoil, every 5 years, they got to get busy again and trying to talk to everybody involved to see if they can get the support to get the milfoil taken care of. So I think it's really important that we figure out a funding source that covers the milfoil, that fixes the nutrient issue that we have at the lake so that we don't have the cyanobacteria blooms anymore, and that it sets this up for it not to be an issue anymore. You know, we have good interlocal agreements set up, we have the funding set up, and it's taken care of. So they can go home, right? So with that being said, I'm not sure whether, you know, we're looking at like the flood district. And, you know, this is really a clean water issue. I know we just raised the clean water fees, but it seems to me like there's a more direct correlation to that in this issue. And so I would like to look at the potential for, I mean, I know everybody wants to be lower than what everybody else is charging in fees, but I know that we are still relatively low in the fees that we're charging, and that's resulting in what we're getting in the lake. So I would like to explore that. I'm open to all options at this point, but I do want to have a clear nexus to, you know, where we're getting that revenue from to what it's actually supporting. But I think that if there's one thing that I want to get done during my time on this council, which may only be another year and a half, we don't know, it would be this, you know, get this set up, get it fixed and done so that people can return to their lives and enjoy the lake. And, you know, one of the things that happened in my conversation was when I moved to Vancouver, I lived on Kaufman, which is fairly close to the lake. And I don't even know how many years it was before I even realized there was a lake there. You know, so a lot of this has to do with the fact that of the dysfunction that's existed there. But, you know, if we can get that taken care of and people can rely on it as a source of recreation and being, you know, involved with the wildlife in the area, I think it could become a real asset to our entire community and can be a draw, you know, into the region. Not that we want more people coming from outside, but you know what I'm saying. It's good for tax dollars. It improves people's quality of life. So I think my recommendation, we'll wait to hear from the other counselors, is we need to continue moving forward. I want to find a way I don't want to do a halfway job on the milfoil. Because if we do, it's just going to spread that much more quickly. So I think we need to identify that funding however we can to take care of that right now. I know that some of the partners that we work with are already willing to donate their private dollars to that, and that shows that, you know, the people that are involved in this, they are in it, right? So I mentioned, like, maybe, you know, so perhaps we could, you know, do like a district around there, but I mean, they're already taxing themselves essentially by voluntarily, you know, offering funding for these activities. So anyway, that being said, full support for it, whatever we can do. And we just need to identify the resources to get what we need done in the meantime, until we get further funding, until we figure out the preferred method alternative that we're going to move forward with, and then identify how we paid for it. So thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Little.
Chair, yeah, there's a lot of challenges, a lot of opportunities. I'm gonna need some help from Kathleen and Chair on what our potential actions could be. I definitely would like to address the milfoil issue as well. We're going to have a conversation with our legislative delegation, and I would like this to be high up on the priority list for funding when we meet with them. And then I'd like to talk a little bit more about the government structure, just so I better understand. So currently there isn't a government structure. It's decisions are made by all these different departments and divisions. You're trying to get all this together. And if we created this structure, this new flood control district or zone district, what would be their purview besides the lake? And Yeah, I'm just curious, and does this exist, this kind of government structure exist in other watersheds in our county? I'm just curious, because I would be, if this is something that's needed, I would be interested in making a decision on one of these two options so that it helps you out making all these decisions.
That's a great question. And just to reiterate, the analysis, the neutral analysis of options, I'm not necessarily recommending a specific pathway forward. And I think Councillor Young mentioned our clean water fees also as a potential source of revenue. In regards to unintended, all of the details of potential other responsibilities, risks, or liabilities that could come with the flood control district, that all needs to be evaluated and discussed much further. And I would actually defer to our prosecuting attorney, Amber Smith, to provide us with the best guidance. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add, but I think you're the appropriate voice on this.
I would recommend there being probably a greater conversation or conversations as we move along further and evaluating those options. There are different liabilities and concerns and responsibilities that the council I would recommend consider looking at and evaluating prior to making a decision between those two governing structures. They are very similar, but they do come with their own unique sets of liabilities and concerns, and also additional conditions that the county would be putting on itself, and the responsibilities that it would be taking on. So this report, giving a great kind of primer into those two potential options, is a great starting point, but there could be more conversation that we could get into and dive deeper into those and really look and compare and contrast those a little more heavily than today.
Thanks. And what would be the purview besides the lake management of a structure like governance structure like this?
My understanding is the main intent is to establish a lake authority and decision-making structure. However, as Amber alluded to, there could be some other, since it's flood control, there's a lot of regulations around flooding and insurances that we would want to make sure we're fully understanding. And I can't speak now to all of those details, but I do think that's a part of the follow-up discussion that needs to happen if there are any other responsibilities that come with that special district establishment in addition to just lake management.
But it may, for example, include Salmon Creek watershed decisions.
It essentially, the proposed area are the contributing watersheds that drain into Lake, River, and Vancouver Lake, which would include the West Slope watersheds, Salmon Creek, and the Burnt Bridge Creek watershed.
There are also different means of raising revenue. If you were looking at the different flat rate structures or ad valorem structures, if you were to create this other entity to raise the funds to build these capital projects, we were looking at the pump solution versus the bridge solution as an option besides the clean water fee that was mentioned.
And just to get to your point about decision making, I would say right now there is no clear decision maker or owner of this work. It has been, and that's been one of the big challenges. I would say the main reason we have been involved is because of the proviso funding, which that appropriation was passed through directly to the county via Department of Ecology. And so we've been shepherding this process. However, I would say that, our councils in partnership with City Council and the Port of Vancouver all have a stake in this. And so that final responsibility, it hasn't landed anywhere. And a special district provides an alternative potential jurisdictional pathway for lake management.
Okay, a couple of thoughts. I like the idea of a governing body. This is something we have to look at in the long term. There will be always management objectives year after year. And I think if there were, and because there's various entities that could have a stake in this, maybe should have a stake in this, but I think it's floundered because everybody has looked at everybody else to take the lead. So because we got that money, we're kind of now taking the lead. But I think a governing body, and there's a lot more to tease out related to all of that, might be a good direction to go that could have its own dedicated funding source that you could budget and have this management strategy over a long haul. If we treat milfoil 1 year and we don't know where the next treatment will be funded from, you've wasted the previous treatment. It has to be an ongoing regime. So I'd be very interested in that and a long-term, and I think the county needs to figure out what exactly is our role. I don't think we have a spare 40 million laying around for one of these solutions. But in working with the other governing entities and whatever could be formed, really figure out what is our appropriate role ongoing related to Vancouver Lake. And in terms of, I think of the Clean Water Act and, its vision really is fishable, swimmable waters. So I think even though one hopes that they can kayak or paddleboard without having water contact, that's not often the case, that there's still water contact. And ideally, and I just look at those pictures of all those people on the beach, so it would still be good to have it managed so that people could go swimming there. And I think I will read through all of this. I'm also interested in all of those contributing streams because there's fish presence in Whipple and salmon. I'm not sure about G Creek, but I know stormwater has been having an impact on all of those creeks. So there's work to be done, definitely, that falls to the county related to that. I don't know, I can't think of anything really else right offhand, but I think we started down this path, and having continued funding to further refine and study this would be good. I don't know the specific next steps, but I think it's been great work that's been accomplished so far. As far as the milfoil, I know our budget is tight. I don't know where we find that money, but I would hate to, and if we've got other partners that are willing to contribute, I would hate to not address that. And, really, these are challenging times, and we're headed into even more challenging times, and we can do all the best we can to manage this lake. But I think climate change, blue-green algae, those are still going to be problems that quite likely, even with all our best efforts. So I think we need to be realistic about that. Thanks.
Chair, one
Go
quick
ahead.
question. I'm curious, have you been able to present to the city of Vancouver, the city council?
Not to city council, but what you were, we did have a technical advisory group meeting in May, and a staff person from the city of Vancouver and the port were in attendance, along with many other stakeholders from state agencies and watershed groups. So they have seen this information, but have not had a chance. You're the first governing board that we're getting in front of with this.
Is that something that you would be willing to do if the invitation was there?
If the invitation was there and if council's asking me to do that, I'd be happy to. I would probably need to figure out the best way to make that request, and probably coordinate with their staff too.
I think that's something that we should try to do. I think it would be valuable for them to see the work that's going on.
Thank you.
And maybe with the port as well.
I think that's a good pathway forward. And talking yesterday, just on the topic of milfoil, we do believe we have some capacity to fund some milfoil treatment in 2025 if we can get through all the procurement processes to do that. The port has committed to treating the Flushing Channel. The estimated contribution is around $12,000. We've heard from the Sailing Club a contribution of $10,000. We would also like to bring funding to the table, but unfortunately at this time, we haven't heard a funding commitment from the city of Vancouver.
Okay. Anything else from anyone? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, did we provide the direction that you need? I'm still kind of new and I'm not sure when we're actually providing direction or not. So I wanted to reiterate that I think we have decided that we would like to move forward on making a decision on some sort of flood control district, at a future meeting. One. I think,
And to learn about all the opportunities and potential risks that come with that, there's further research that needs to be done.
absolutely.
Yes.
I think we've said that we would like to treat milfoil as soon as possible and try to find the resources for that, so that there might be a point where we make a decision on that.
We're nodding our heads. This
Okay.
is very good.
Heard that.
I appreciate you summarizing because
Okay.
you can't always tell when we've given direction or not.
Yeah.
Keep going.
And that we really appreciate the options that you've laid out. We had some questions that maybe you could add a little bit more to those options and that some of the information about them, but that we are in agreement that we would like to find funding for that and try to find out what our options are for funding for that, including communicating to our legislative delegation that this would be a high priority for us, for them to represent us in that way. Did you need anything related to our work in Lacamas Lake with Vancouver Lake combined? Is there something needed over there?
I don't think at this time. I think what you'll see in 2026 is that request for ongoing budget at $100,000 a year for lake management activities. That was built into the rate study. Again, we can achieve cost recovery for that. How we divide that money and what we invest in between the two lakes, those are decisions that we'll be needing to make in the future. So I don't think I'm asking for clear direction right now, but what I can say is that we are coordinating with Camas right now on the interlocal agreement that was signed in 2024 and making sure that we're making progress on all of the things that we've committed to within that ILA. So that work doesn't get lost. And my understanding is they just completed a treatment recently that was Camas driven. And we were thankful that they gave us the heads up that was happening, but we weren't involved in the planning or execution of that treatment.
Okay, and I did just read recently that the city's trying to work on a public safety committee to support awareness of the kids jumping off the bridges and the recent drownings. I would just like to add support for that from the council. That at least I think that's a great thing to do. We've had a recent death there, and that's just an important communication tool that we got to add to. I think the other thing that we agreed to is that we would like to make sure that the goal for the lake would include swimming and water contact as our goal. Yeah.
I think that I feel confident that I have direction to go forward and hire the Lakes and Watershed Coordinator and continue to identify funding sources. And I don't want to lose the momentum on this work either. We don't want to wait too long and have to pick it back up a year from now. So I'm hearing support to continue the work with existing resources as we continue to find other resources of funding.
I could add a few more things. I also heard a focus on non-point source pollution of the lakes contributing to look at that. And also to get the opportunity to ask to present these findings to City of Vancouver as well as the port. I think that summarizes what we've heard today.
Thank you, Jenny.
Great. That's a lot of advice. Go ahead, Councillor.
Chair, thank you. Just a really quick question as I'm kind of processing a lot of this information. There are two potential options to fund the project, these projects, right? So flood control districts or flood control zone districts and increasing clean water fees.
I wouldn't say that those are the only options. Those are two potential structures to generate rates and charges, like a local source of revenue through establishment of a district. But then we do have our clean water fees, which we already assess to all property owners in unincorporated Clark County that can be used to help pay for clean water implementation activities.
Okay, which would include funding these projects, correct?
Correct. And we've only built in $100,000 a year right now for lake management in our existing rates that we have.
Okay, so fees that are currently enforced but could be increased if you want to support the funding of this project. Because as I look at the potential creation or establishment of these districts, there's key advantages and key challenges, and it seems like it just adds another layer of bureaucracy. And where if you were to just increase, fees for clean water, it sounds kind of a clean process of doing it. I don't know what the challenges are. I don't see the comparisons here, but I'd be curious to learn what that would look like.
Yeah, I think the benefit is it establishes a clear decision-making authority and responsibility to carry the work forward that isn't, 100% the county or the port or the city. We'd be stakeholders, and it would provide that structure. I would also, the challenges are we don't know all the details about the potential risks or liabilities associated with that. We also have a lot of other funding needs that the county is pursuing right now, and that we need to be considering balancing how we're collecting local sources of revenue. I would also offer that through our intergovernmental agreement that we do have a mechanism for us to all collaboratively contribute funding. Right now, the port, the city, and Clark County are have a shared investment of $25,000 each a year to fund LSEP's work, so approximately $75,000. And we were discussing using that intergovernmental agreement and looking at if that's a mechanism for us to increase our local contributions that we're providing. And our clean water fund, our clean water rates are our current source of revenue for that contribution.
Thank you. And just to be clear, I'm very supportive of this Vancouver Lake Management Plan. But it sounds like it's been a project in play for quite some time now. And so whatever this council can do to streamline the process and make it a reality, I think I can be even more supportive.
Thank you. And I appreciated Chair Marshall's comments about managing expectations. If you were at the Vancouver Lake Symposium, the Clark County Historical Museum presented history of Vancouver Lake and confirmed that folks have been trying to figure out what to do with Vancouver Lake since the early 1900s. And we're still continuing that discussion. And I'm excited that we have some momentum, and hopefully we're one step closer to having some more management solutions.
Chair, just one real quick comment. So first of all, thank you for all the work on this. But I just wanted to say one last little thing. And I know you weren't really asking for direction on this now, but when we talk about Vancouver Lake and Lacamas Lake, it's my impression that Camas is really working on this. And I want to make sure that we don't penalize them because they're working on it. You know what I mean? It tends to be when you have a partner that's helping with something, your focus can because that's kind of being taken care of a little bit, and your focus can veer. But I want to make sure that doesn't happen. It's important when they are participating that we reward them for that, if you want to call it reward, right?
100%. Camas has been the real leader on the lake management work, and they've received appropriations of funding to lead that. And they've really been focused on the in-lake management, and we've been consulting to them on that and providing monitoring support. The contributing watershed is 88% Clark County's jurisdiction. So we've really committed to focusing what we can on watershed implementation. But we really appreciate Camas's ongoing work on lake management, and public health continues to work very closely with them on monitoring and contact advisory. So that coordination is ongoing, and we're committed to continuing that, and thankful for their partnership.
Okay, I've just remembered one other thing that might be an additional direction, and that is if there's opportunities to collaborate with the estuary partnership or present that information to other partners out there, that they have the ability to bring some large dollars to the table. So I'm grateful for them. And thank you very much. And thank you to the friends out there. Thanks for sticking around and all the work that you've done. So I think that concludes our work session. So we will adjourn and come back for council time this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.